Welcome to the HMNS Beyond Bones podcast. I am your mental curator, filling in for Craig Lavati, who is off today. I am Johnny Hemberger, and I'm sitting here, as always, with our co-host, Kat Havens. Kat, how are you?
I'm doing great. How about you?
I'm doing wonderful. Like I say, I'm always very happy to sit in for Craig on these podcasts, so it's my absolute joy and privilege to do so.
Well,
Today
we're talking.
Yeah, thank you very much. Today we're talking to John Norman, who is John, what is your official title and what do you do around the museum?
Well, I'm the CEO of World Heritage Exhibitions and one of the organizers of the current Ramses the Great exhibition.
Wonderful. So we've had, before we move on, I want to do something because it's gnawing at me right now. I'm going to put on my other glasses and throw people for a little bit of a loop as they look at me and John, because I think we're very similar.
You guys do have I didn't even pick up on that face shape and everything's very similar.
Exactly. I'll say a time warp, but not too much. We're talking maybe a year apart at least. Something.
Yes.
Yeah. Exactly. So anyways, John, can you tell us some of what has gone into bringing Ramses to the Houston Museum of Natural Science?
Well, this is the first stop on a 10-city tour. So we worked very closely with the Houston Museum to develop the relationship and to organize and put this all together. As you know, organizing an exhibition of any size, but especially one that's dealing with the government of Egypt, takes a lot of people, a lot of relationships. And we were able to basically help put the team together to make it all work, get everything negotiated, built the exhibition during COVID time period, which, created its own unique challenges, and ultimately had to travel and move everything here to open up the exhibit in November.
Yeah. And I think it's one of the, an important thing to kind of touch on is, museum goers come and they're drawn to the attraction and the history and obviously all the world that surrounds Ramses and Egyptian artifacts in general. But one thing I want to help people understand a bit better, just the general kind of admission coming through and seeing it, is that it's not like getting these artifacts here is an easy job. Like you're mentioning, you're working with the Egyptian government and there's a whole lot of players involved. Like we don't have these things just sitting in the storage warehouse. And it's not just sitting in an 18-wheeler somewhere willy-nilly for people to bring in and bring it to the loading dock and let's put it in the exhibit. There are so many more interpersonal dynamics and intergovernmental dynamics that go into it. So can you expand on that kind of background dynamic and even the government dynamic as the best of your ability in getting Ramses artifacts here in Egypt?
And that's an interesting point, I think, to a lot of people behind the scenes. They come and they see it set up at HMNS and they think, oh, it's right here. It must have been, it just comes and installs and it's there. But the reality of it is it is a process. It's the initial discussion of why you want to do the exhibition. Then it's getting the right academics together to choose the objects. And then just like anything, you have a menu of objects that you would like to have. And then you have to edit that list down to get everybody comfortable with, are you going to tell this right story that you want to tell? And then there is a phase where the objects have to be restored or cleaned to make sure that they're in good condition to make a 10-city tour. The very last thing that we want to do is have an object leave Egypt and get damaged somehow. Yeah. So that's one of the first things is this object safe to go on tour? Then the object has to be examined. A company comes in that is experienced in building crates for shipping and travel. And it's usually done with a crate within a crate. So if there is movement, that the object itself on the inside will not be damaged. They have to figure out how many crates are needed. And that process takes a while. You have to build the crates, then you have to figure out the right people to ship it, when it's going to be shipped, cleared by customs, transported from the airport. And certainly you want to keep the awareness of these priceless objects moving a secret. So it's not like you put Ramses the Great artifacts come here on the side of the truck.
Yes.
Priceless artifacts inside.
Priceless artifacts are
Right here.
Yep.
So security is another important part of this. So that's the part of this business that I really love. It's that stuff behind the scenes that nobody really understands, that it has to happen. And it has to happen without error.
Right. And has to happen with the utmost respect. And like we said, we're talking about Egypt here specifically, but the rules for bringing artifacts from, ancient Rome may be different than ancient Egypt, and bringing artifacts from medieval times from England and Northern Europe and all that is different type of, it's a different scenario and a different different dynamics.
Each has its own challenges, I'm sure, that are very specific to wherever it is you're working, whoever it is you're working with, for sure.
But since to lead the conversation on a little bit more, I would imagine that since Egypt and that area is more or less the cradle of civilization and the cradle of modern civilization, right, that coordinating everything with Egypt, it isn't just unique to Egypt versus like coordinating with Germany for something, that it probably offers up its own unique challenges with being ultimately respectful for the artifacts and being ultimately conscious of preserving the history. And like you said, telling the right story, and that the correct story is told, that there's no kind of gaps or extrapolations in where they think this thing came from, that it's all done to kind of the best of the ability, and that the Egyptians and the powers that be are included in every step of the way. I really want people to understand that, like we said earlier, it's not just an artifact hunter went to a pyramid, at Giza. Oh, we want that for the museum, and then just kind of put it in a briefcase and bring it. Like, it's the hoops and hurdles and the respect and the communication is paramount, and it's ongoing. Like, once it's here, does the conversation end once it's here in Houston? Does the conversation and the connection with Egyptian officials end, or is it a constant ongoing process?
Well, the unique thing about working with Egypt is that they demand that there is an official Egyptian, either curator or let's say someone from the museum is at the exhibition during the entire time the artifacts are in a city. So every 20 days, we have to fly an Egyptian designated by them to America to then turn around and send the other guy back. And there's a constant flow of Egyptian curators that stay with the Ramses exhibition to make sure that they're basically firsthand, somebody's there. If something goes wrong or if there's an issue with an object, that they do not have to wait and then get on a plane and come over. Mm-hmm. So that's an added expense as well, but that's the way that Egypt deals with it. Other countries, let's say, we have Italy with the Pompeii. We do not have to do it with them, but Egypt itself does that.
And I think that's important to know too, because I think sometimes people have the feeling that maybe, why does this exhibit cost so much to see? Well, there's a lot that goes into it. There's a lot of costs that are not seen, right? I think that's important to know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for bringing that up. And that's usually a topic that doesn't get enough recognition at all, because it's not we're not UPSing
Right.
the objects, and you go down to the local UPS store. Typically, it entails chartering an entire 787 plane or something like that to be able to take the objects directly from, let's say, Egypt directly to Houston. And you don't want it. It's not going on a commercial flight underneath the luggage, and the guys are taking it off with the luggage, and it says, "Oh, this is priority. Let's put it over on this belt."
Yeah.
The costs are in the hundreds of thousands of dollars to just bring the things over across the country.
Right.
So thanks, Kat, for bringing that up.
Absolutely. And I think the more people understand, what goes into that ticket cost, the more, the happier they are, to do that, right. To pay for it, because they know that, it's just part of the hidden cost.
And it's part of, it helps realize the scope of the privilege it is to be in the same room with this stuff. That, again, it's not just something you saw on Cairo eBay and had it shipped UPS to Houston. These are World Heritage artifacts from the dawn of civilization, really, that you're in the same room with. And I know it can be hard it can be easy, I think, to lose that scope when you just came from, the snack bar and bought some Doritos, and now you're 30 seconds later, you're up looking at a mummy from 4,000 or 5,000 years ago,
3,500 years ago. Yeah, for sure.
It's easy for that convenience, I think, to delude the impact and importance of these artifacts that you're seeing. So if you, I know it kind of sounds like being salespeople here, but whatever it costs to see it, I don't think in the grand scheme of things, it's for what you're getting, for the benefit that it brings to your mind and your soul. Once you really grasp, once you hear what we're talking about, the time and energy and money and security and government dynamics that go into getting these here, that it's not just paying X amount of dollars to see this thing. You are able to witness something that maybe not many people in the world will ever get that close to. It's the true proof.
I'll let you talk to you in a second, John, but I wanted to add that experiences matter. I decided I was going to work at a museum, and that's really what I wanted to do, because I went and saw the King Tut exhibit as a 7-year-old or a 6-year-old, so experiences change lives. And, I think museums and exhibits do a whole lot of good and a whole lot of teaching and learning and inspiring. So there's that aspect of it too. And that's kind of priceless, in my opinion.
John, has the museum had a big impact on your life?
Oh, huge impact on my life. And so has King Tut itself. And I was very fortunate in 2005 to convince the Egyptian government to allow King Tut to tour again, and went over and negotiated with Zahi Hawass in Switzerland. And that really was the beginning of this incredible run with my relationship with Egypt. And when we brought the King Tut exhibit to Houston, but we ended up being at the next door at the Art Museum. But the museum, and you touched on the most important aspect of, I think, the museum experience is being in the presence of these objects. And they're not replicas. They're not ones that sort of look like it. you're in the room with that piece that was there. It was there 3,300 years ago. It was used by a person, thousands of years ago. It was designed, it was built by somebody. It was, the craftsmanship that you look at, it creates an incredible amount of marvel and mystery and thought provoking. And that's what I think museums enable people to do, especially at your institution where your collections are so vast and so great compared to other museums in the country. And I'm sure the people in Houston are, they've been there, they've seen it. They might even be sort of lax about it, but they don't realize the amount of effort and difficulty it takes for a museum to collect and curate all those different, whether it's dinosaurs to the jewelry to the stones, the gems and things like that you guys have there. Oh. It's absolutely an incredible place. And there's a lot of people, just like Kat said, where they have a moment in their life that they have a memory of, or they just remember that, and that follows through their life. I always think of, when we had a couple of years ago, when the COVID first came out, we had our King Tut exhibit in London at the time. And I was doing an interview and I said, yeah, we've probably done about almost 20 million people have come and gone through our King Tut exhibit since 2005. And I'm thinking of 20 million people got to see something that I was able to organize and create. And that's a pretty big responsibility. And I wonder how many people went and saw that, and it also changed their lives, just like when you saw it in the 70s. Mm-hmm. It changed your life. So a lot of people, another good thing for museums is the families coming, where you see the parents bringing their kids because they want to teach them that they should appreciate the real thing. Anybody can go, like you said, Johnny, go online and look at images of any museum or any artifact anywhere. But until you're getting in that same room, knowing that there's nothing there but you and the piece, that's where the magic happens.
You gave me goosebumps with that answer. Honestly, you did. It was really well put. I remember, like I said, standing in line with all of my cousins and all of my brothers and our poor parents who had done that, because it's so important for your parent, to teach your children to appreciate things, right? To appreciate history, to appreciate art and science. And that was a great answer. The actual history. And that's one thing I'm so grateful for. My son is 18 months old, and he has the ultimate privilege of being raised in a museum. Like I really want to retire from Houston Museum of Natural Science. Like that's when you interview for things. So where do you see yourself in 5 years? Well, let me tell you about 30 years. Like here in 30 years. My daughter grew up in the museum. She's 19 now, and that changed her life and direction. I wholeheartedly believe it, because, she basically grew up and spent every summer there. Right. Yep. And like John was saying, around these fabulous things that sometimes maybe people take for granted. Absolutely. And it's not even just, John, earlier you were talking about the 20 million people that came through to see King Tut, and you facilitated that. It's not just that 20 million people were able to see it. I imagine what you're also wondering is, or thinking is, out of those 20 million, it's just playing the game of odds. Just like kids come through the paleo hall and become paleontologists, your exhibit that you helped facilitate helped create new generations of archaeologists. Do you ever think about that? Yep.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely.
I got to ask something real quick. I don't want to get too derailed. John, what do you like playing on the guitar back there? You listen to B.B. King, Stevie Ray Vaughan, all that good stuff?
Well, I actually came up through the 80s and played. That was, from 20 to 30 years old, from 80 to 90, and it was really the pop rock, the Journey, Foreigner time period. And I played in the 80s rock band and toured around the States and had an album out in 88, band called Champion. Wow. And I was last night, I was looking at my fingers today. I've got some new blisters because I was up till about 2 playing. And, I haven't played in a while. So as you know, your calluses tend to wear down, but
I play too. That's why I was asking. My guitars are all up on a wall on the opposite end of this wall. I've got 7 or 8 hanging there.
And I can't play, but I'm a child of the 80s. So I love the fact that you were an 80s music provider. That's fun.
Yeah.
John, if you have links to any of that music, I would love to use it as bump music on the end of the podcast. That would be awesome.
Sure.
Good idea. So
there is a reason in kind of true host form. I'm going to try to connect the derailment with what we're talking about. I find, so since my background is in music as well, do you find, as I do through creating content for the museum, video content and such, and hosting radio, like it doesn't seem like it's a connection to music, but I get the same sense, if not more so, and some at least even to the same creative, creative outlet that I get through music, through like learning a new guitar piece. I get that same outlet and satisfaction through the work I do for the museum, through making videos and me doing my radio show and the podcast and everything like that. I get that creative outlet. In doing your work, John, do you get the same sort of creative like fulfillment that you would get from music? Different but similar?
Absolutely, 100%. You're the first person that ever said that to me that understands exactly. So in all of our exhibitions, I work with a composer, and we compose all the music for all of our exhibitions, whether it's the Ramses. All of our exhibitions have music that was specifically composed for that gallery. Wow. I edit and produce all the video for all the exhibits just because I love doing it. And so I'm really, really involved in all those elements of producing these and organizing these exhibitions. And it is very, very fun and satisfying, and does provide a very close link to that creative process in music.
And I think the music is so important in these exhibits. Like some people may not even notice it, but it sets the atmosphere and the tone, and almost kind of helps transport you back to that time period mentally, and it's amazing.
Absolutely. Like if you go through the Ramses exhibit right now and you go through it, and then halfway through, I shut off all the sound.
It's not the same.
And it's going to be like, whoa, what just happened?
You take 90% of it off the table, of the impact off the table when you lose.
So let me tell you an interesting story. So since I came from the music business, then was working on concerts and tours, and then got into Titanic exhibits back in 1998, 2000, whatever. And then when I first was able to do the King Tut exhibit 2005 opened at LACMA, which is the LA County Museum of Art in Los Angeles. And I was telling somebody this exact story today, is that the keyboard player from my old band, David, and I worked and composed all the music to King Tut. We were setting up the exhibition. We're 2 days from opening. All the speakers are put in. We're testing the speakers and the volume and everything like that. And the director of LACMA comes walking through, and she says, what's going on there? And I said, oh, that's the music that we composed for the exhibition. And she looked at me and she says, you can't play music in an art museum. And I stood there and I was like, what are you talking about? She said, no, we are an art museum. It has to be completely quiet. People have to be in there. They're there to look at the object, and they have to have uninterrupted thought, blah, blah, blah. She goes and runs to her office and grabs the contract and says, look at here. It says the LACMA has 100% control over the approval of the exhibition. Wow. I am not approving it. You shut it off right now.
Wow.
So we had to open up the first city on the King Tut tour, still did 936,000 people, but it was silent and as quiet as could be. I couldn't wait to get out and go to the next city.
Yeah.
So,
as we're sitting here, I have Pompeii music and Ramses music going through my head because you remember it somehow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just did hopefully finished editing, pending the approval of the Battleship Texas Foundation. I'm teasing that video coming up. I'm going to say 90% of the impact of that video is directly on the music. I didn't compose the music. I sourced it from, royalty free and all that. I paid for the licenses and everything like that. But I promise you, so going back to the art exhibit in LA County, if you were to put a group of people in there with the music that you had composed running, underneath part of the experience, and you say, how are you liking it? Oh, just how are you liking the experience in total? Oh, it's wonderful. Da, 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 da. And then you did a B sample. You just cut off the music and be like, how do you like it now? They'd be like, it's lost so much of its impact because that sense is gone. Just like in Egypt exhibit and everything, you can smell that the 3D, the VR experience, everything has those smells. The more senses you can hit, the more impactful it is. And when you remove any one of those senses from the experience, you lose so much of the exhibit. So I'm thrilled. And I think it's kind of a common thing. I think a lot of creative people that you may not think you wouldn't consider creative, at least the common passerby. Oh, the person who set up this art exhibit, this Egypt exhibit in Ramses and King Tut and everything like that. You might think the people involved with that that it's suits, that it's museum suits and archaeological suits and academics putting this together. But no, the reason why it's connecting with you, it's not just a vase that has been used 3,300 years ago by an Egyptian underneath a cold fluorescent light on some linoleum, on a piece of marble or something like that. Every aspect of it is thought through thoroughly by artists and by creatives, so that when some of those 20 million people walking through, you not only grab most of their attention and pique their curiosity, but as I mentioned earlier, you're creating more archaeologists. Even with paleontology, the way the dinosaurs are set up in that dynamic, artistic way, that is what's responding with people, and that's what they take forward, at least in my opinion, versus just a crummy lit room, fluorescent lights, no music. I'm surprised that the museum in LA County, that she was so adamant about it being silent. On one hand, I understand the art museum and look at Van Gogh quietly, but it's part of storytelling. And I'll wrap up what I'm saying here because I'm running on. Is music is storytelling? I
wonder whether, I haven't worked with them since then, but it would be interesting to see if now they have the same demand that all of their I doubt it. I'm sure music has worked its way in there, but this was only 2005. So it's 17 years ago. And the director is no longer there, but it just shows you how the let's face it, the museum business itself is a business. And if you're not delivering what the population is expecting or demanding, you're
Right.
going to lose visitors, which is not good for anybody. And I'm not saying it's whether you're an academic or not. You just have to, I think, be wise enough to understand that there's so much competition nowadays that
Yeah.
you have to deliver something that is, going to deliver on people's experience.
That's competitive. You're in 2005. That was kind of the beginnings of people having access to high speed internet and like cable internet, and that was just that was the bloom. I call myself an 80s baby. I was born in 83. Was a young child through the late 80s, and I didn't have my first cell phone, not a smartphone. I didn't have my first cell phone until I was 18 years old or so, in like 2001, 2002, after I graduated high school. So I grew up in that era from the 80s to early 2000s, before high speed internet really took off. And where I'm going with that is, by 2005, I think we were on that cusp of like this oversaturation and overstimulation, to where institutions like the museum in LA County at the time really, as you were saying, John, would have no choice. You can't come from watching something on the internet or YouTube or TV filmed in high definition with all this sound and 5.1 and all the visuals and editing and stuff like that, and then go to a stuffy museum. It wouldn't compete in that. And I've seen the Houston Museum of Natural Science since growing up here since 1989. Every time I visit, I think HMNS in particular, because I can toot our own horn here, has done a really good job of staying current. That we've had leadership, in my experience, that has been open to changing with the times, but in a very respectful, how do we tell the story most effectively kind of way. So I don't know exactly my question with that. Just that you had to stay competitive. And have you experienced that in your career, John? Have you noticed that kind of, when I started, it was like this, now it's like this?
Well, I love the growth. I love being able to say, okay, like for instance, in the Ramses exhibit here, we have the Battle of Kadesh.
Oh yeah.
Which is, I've never done anything like that before, but we got with the right company. Creatively, we came up and said, how in the world can we do something that would be this dynamic and layered and in 3D, but you don't need glasses. And I love pushing, let's say it's a boundary, but just figuring out a better way to tell the story. That's the most important thing. And if it was just putting up a screen and giving a couple images and just putting the text up there, you're delivering content, but you're not getting people interested enough to sit there and really pay attention. So that's why all those bells and whistles are there, is to grab that audience and say, boy, I want to watch that. Oh, I'm going to watch that again. And then they absorb it even better. So when they leave there, they learn something, and you can't feed it to them in a text label anymore. Mm-hmm. It's just not going to happen.
There's too much competition for our attention now, and you have to be the brightest light or the most engaging thing there.
People don't read those labels, not as much maybe as they used to. I like to read them, and I know, Kat, but I mean, it has to be a challenge to get those labels to convey the information, like almost in a glance. It's in my opinion, it's a disservice, and it's an unfortunate thing that people maybe less often now read the labels to these things because of all the wealth of information that they can get from those labels. But you're right, John. It's this combination of things, and I think pushing the state of the art, to tell the story of that battle in this immersive 3D without glasses, like unintrusive way. Like if you were asked people, hey, before you walk in here, put on these glasses, that's kind of adding rigmarole to the deal versus just walk in, it starts, and you are just immersed in the whole thing. Is a very effective way of
I've got an observation too. You've done a good job at what we've been talking about from the beginning, because when people find out that I work at HMNS at the museum, one of the first things many of them bring up is the Titanic exhibit. And they go on to describe like getting their ticket and going through the exhibit and then finding out at the end.
They lived or died. Yeah.
Yeah. And like however many, 15 years later, however long it's been, 20 maybe, they remember it.
Yeah, that's 22 years ago when we started that. And I remember coming up with, I don't even remember who in our group came up with that concept, but we were just talking about how great it would be to hand the ticket. And then it was like, well, do we put a passenger's name on it, in a description of it? But every exhibition that we did with Titanic after that, we used that. And then at the end, you had the memorial wall, as we called it. Mm-hmm. And you had to see that if you were a first class passenger, the odds were pretty good that you would have survived. Mm-hmm. If you walked in and you got a third class passenger ticket, there was a pretty good chance that you were not going to survive. So it also showed you right there to this discrepancy in the classes.
Yeah. And as an educator, I'm envisioning an activity where they can do statistics and calculations as to, what were your chances?
Yeah, I haven't found anything at all the exhibitions I've been fortunate to have produced since then. I haven't found anything that beats that so simple but very tactile way of describing how difficult that would have been and how tragic it was.
Yeah.
John, to start wrapping up here, because I feel like we could talk for hours and hours and hours about these things. Is there a place where people can go find out more about the World Heritage exhibitions? And is it set up to take donations, or is there anything like that way people can volunteer, or is there anything?
No, we're a for-profit company, so we do not need to go down that donation.
Yeah.
But I would just go to Google and put in World Heritage Exhibitions, and we will pop up, and you can see the other projects that we have. And I know I can guarantee that there will be others that will be coming to Houston as well down the road. I've got a great relationship with your institution and with Joel, and we thoroughly enjoy that relationship. And if it wasn't for that relationship, we wouldn't have Ramses. Yeah. So it was really critical to have that, us to approach Egypt together to make that work.
That's wonderful. I will put the link to World Heritage Exhibitions down in the description. So if you're watching the podcast on YouTube, check the description. If you're just listening to the audio version of the podcast in Spotify or Spreaker or wherever you're listening to the podcast, like I mentioned in previous podcasts, always check to the description. You'll find goodies in there. John, I'll talk to you. I'll send you an email after here, because I'm serious. I want some of your music so that I can put as bumps. I want the 80s stuff. The Egypt stuff is great, but I want
I understand. You want the champion band stuff. Be happy to send it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time, John, and good talking to you too, Kat.
Thanks. Yeah. Thanks for your time, guys.
Sure. It was a pleasure, guys. Bye-bye.
Why would I think you were serious when you give golden prize?